Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Applying Ethology webinar. Before we start today, I just would like to remind everyone to our housekeeping rules. Please remember to turn off your microphone and camera to have the presentation run as smoothly as possible. And if you have questions for the speaker, feel free to raise your virtual hand at the end of the presentation. Or if you prefer, you can also just drop a text in the chat and the moderator will read out your question and the speaker will answer your question. So with that being said, I'm very happy to introduce today's speaker to you. Most of you are probably very familiar that dogs are extremely good in interacting and communicating with humans, but we don't know a lot about how other domestic species found these tasks. So we hardly see, in particular, a true comparison or a true comparative approach comparing the performance of different domestic species in this regard. So it's my and our big pleasure today to welcome Paula Perez Fraga from the Lorand University. She's a PhD student and she's working on a research project called Interspecific Communicative Abilities of the Family Dog and Domestic Pig from a comparative ethological perspective. And without further delay, I'm handing over the microphone and the stage to you, Paula.
Okay, thanks very much, Christian, for this lovely introduction. And thanks everyone for being here tonight. So good evening to everyone. Hopefully that you are hearing me well. If not, just tell me something now. If not, I'm going to do that. So my name is Paula Perez, as Christian said. I'm a PhD candidate. Well, I'm almost finishing my PhD in the Department of Ethology of the ELTE University in Budapest. And in this department, I am part of the Neuroethology of Communication Lab. And I'm going to talk today a bit about my whole PhD topic, that is the interspecific socio-communicative abilities of the family pig and family dog from a comparative ethological perspective. So, first of all, as Christian said, we know that dogs are really talented and predisposed for engaging in social communicative interactions with humans. Furthermore, they are very good in displaying human-oriented communicative behavior. So in producing human-oriented communicative behaviors. We know that genetic changes during dogs' domestication are suggested to be responsible for these enhanced communicative abilities of dogs, but not only that, also their experience with humans. And it's very important their experience during their socialization period, for example. But besides that, also species-specific traits are quite important because we know that dogs, for example, are already very communicative in an intraspecific level, so conspecifics. And they are very good, for example, in displaying and reading visual cues from their conspecifics. But not only dogs. There are also other domestics and domestic animals that communicate with humans to more or less similar extent as dogs in different contexts. So other animals have been found to perform these human-oriented communicative and social behaviors. However, there are things that it's important to address. First of all, that most of these studies that have been done in different animals, in them, the keeping conditions of these animals were different among them. And also they are different among the highly socialized family dog. As Christian also said, when we are researching this in this human-oriented communicative behaviors field, there is really a lack of comparative research. So there are only few studies that have compared directly the communicative abilities of animals, of some animals to others, and mostly to dogs. There are not really a lot of comparative studies with the family dog. This is why when we started my PhD research, we thought that for investigating the development of interspecific communicative abilities of the animals, a comparative approach might help. And this is how we arrive to our model species, the domestic pig. So, and you might think that why pigs? So, well, pigs, for us, what makes them like interesting is that they have like some similarities, let's say, to family dogs. For example, they are also very like communicative in an intraspecific level. They have a very rich communicative repertoire. However, they communicate mostly with like auditory cues. They are like very vocal, for example. As dogs, pigs are really social animals, and they are also like group living animals. Very important also as well is that they have a new role as companion animals. So their popularity as companion animals is like growing. There are like, for example, in South America, there are like a lot of people having pigs at home as companion pets. So this is also very important because we need to investigate, we need to learn how these animals are behaving in a household environment in order to ensure their welfare and also to avoid behavior problems and to like make the convivence like easy for the owners. Other aspect that is very important for us is that, let's say, like a dog-like socialization, so a similar socialization as the dog, can be provided to these pigs when they live in a household environment. So this is how or where how we arrive to the aim of my hobby is the topic, that is trying to identify some human-oriented communicative and social behaviors of family pigs and compare them with those of family dogs. And this is how we created or how we arrived to our family pig project. This is the family pig project is like a long-term scientific project in which we have some Minnesota mini pigs involved. When we started, we supervised their adoption and their rearing conditions, and we provided them very intense human socialization, not only at home as dogs, more or less, but also at the university, at the department. These pigs were like highly exposed to different human stimuli. And we tested, and we are still testing them, different ages during their life development. So this is a bit of an overview of my PhD, or my whole PhD, of the work of this almost 4 years now. We have like 2 blocks of studies. We did like a lot of different studies in the pigs, with the pigs. The first block is what we call the emergence of communication, and the second block is about social abilities of these animals. Today, for the sake of time, I'm going to focus mostly in the emergence of communication in this first block. So some of you that are like familiar or that are working with communication or with like production of communication in animals towards humans, you see that like most of these studies are based in well-known paradigms. So in already like tested paradigms in like different domestic and non-domestic animals. And as they are all, so these are the 3 studies, but in some sense they are like quite similar, because at the end what we are testing is how these animals produce this communication towards the humans. So this is why I'm going to show them all together, like in parallel, and we are going to have like a together discussion of these 3 studies. Before starting, just to remember you and to like stress this part, that what we are researching here, what I'm going to talk is about human-oriented communicative behavior. So about the production of communicative behaviors. In this case, we are not talking about how animals perceive human-given cues. So it's how animals produce these communicative behaviors. When we are like doing this kind of tests, there are like different behaviors that are our, let's say, like target behaviors. So the behaviors that we are like looking to. First of all is orientation towards the humans. Then we have like, let's say, like the most interesting or most, I wouldn't say important, but just our like target behavior is this like gaze alternations between the human and a target and a goal, or about like something that the animal can reach. This is very important because these gaze alternations, it's supposed to have a referential communicative function in animals. And it's supposed to be similar to the human pointing in animals that doesn't have hands. We also like look for physical interactions and, for example, vocal behavior. So let's see the background of these three studies. First of all, the face orientation was our first study. And we know that visibility of the face of the eyes plays a key role in recognizing the other's attention. And it's very important as to sorry? Well, it's important to like ensure the communication channel. We know that it's very important in humans, for example, in like humans in communicative interactions. Dogs use eye contact as a form of social interaction spontaneously from early age and without training. The unsolvable task, for the background for the unsolvable task, dogs seem predisposed to communicate with humans in problem-solving context. So in context of uncertainty, or in context in which they face a problem that is difficult to solve or impossible to solve. In this context, they orient at the humans as an initiation of a communicative interaction. And the last one is what we call like the showing behavior, because it's based in the classic showing behavior paradigms. For those that are not familiar with the topic, the showing behavior is a communicative action in which a signaler, in this case the animal, tries to direct the attention of another individual, in this case the human present, to a desired target that normally is out of their reach. Dogs and also other animals have been found to communicate with humans, and with this kind of behavior. And this behavior is supposed to have a referential communicative function in the animals. So just to show you like how it works, there is like an animal, a human, and an outer reach target or goal. The animal displays some human-oriented behaviors to get the attention of the human. When he gets the attention, then displays some kind of directional behavior to direct the attention of the human to the desired target. So our aims for the face orientation was to assess if young family pigs exhibit this human face orientation and also other human-oriented communicative behaviors, and compare them with those of dogs, because this was like our very first study. In the unsolvable task, we wanted to have like the first comparison of the performance of a similar socialized, highly social domestic species with a family dog. And for the showing behavior, we wanted to assess the emergence of referential communicative behaviors in young family pigs and compare them with the behaviors of young family dogs in this out of reach paradigm. So let's go to the subjects. For the face orientation, we tested 10 dogs and pigs. They were like quite young, around 4 months old. The setting was very simple. So the experimenter was just kneel down, trying to make eye contact with the subject. We had two conditions. One control condition in which there was no food, and it worked like this. So the experimenter was faking to take some pieces of food from a container, and then for 2 minutes trying to make eye contact with the subject. In the food condition, it was like the performance was the same, but in this case, the experimenter was taking food from the container, first of all, and like giving it to the subject meanwhile doing eye contact. And then for 2 minutes, again, the same, being like just kneel down and trying to make eye contact with the subject. This is a pig in a food condition of the face orientation study. So you see like so I'm like kneel down, just like following the animal with the face and trying to make eye contact with him. So let's have a look on the results. I'm going just to show you the most important results of all these experiments. First of all, we check like the body orientation, so the time with the animal were oriented towards the experimenter's body. In all these graphs, so in all the results, you will see always like the dogs in blue and the pigs in pink. And so what we found is that during the control condition, both pigs and dogs oriented to the experimenter's body similarly. But pigs oriented more in the food than in the control condition. So they increased their orientation towards the experimenter's body during the food condition. And they tended to do it even like more than dogs when the food was present. So the expectation about food or the presence of food itself trigger like this behavior in pigs, so increase the human orientation in pigs. About the face orientation, so our target behavior, what we found is that like during the food condition, both pigs and dogs oriented more to the experimental phase, but dogs oriented more than pigs to the experimental phase in the control condition. So what we found is, yes, like the presence of the food trigger or increase this behavior in pigs, but only dogs perform it like naturally, without any reward, without any food present. In the solvable task, we tested like 12 dogs and 10 pigs. They were a bit older, around 7 months. So this was like a classic unsolvable task paradigm for those who are familiar with the task. If not, I'm going to explain it shortly. In this kind of tasks, the animals face a task that they can solve for some trials. So normally it's like a puzzle or a box in which the animal can really like open to find the food. And after several trials, this task becomes unsolvable. So the animal has already the motivation and the learning of being able to solve it, and suddenly they can solve it. In our case, that was like the classic Tupperware that was not closed for some trials. And then at the end, it was like securely closed, so the animal couldn't open it. What also it's important in our task is that before the solvable phases, the solvable trials, we added a baseline phase. In this phase, the animal was facing the apparatus open, without any food, without like anything, only like the apparatus there. And this served us, first of all, to make the animal a bit familiar with the apparatus, but also we wanted to assess any human-oriented behaviors in the absence of food. So when the animal was facing a new apparatus or like a new experience, let's say. And we also use it to compare it with the unsolvable phase. This is Odi, one of our pigs, in an unsolvable task. So here he cannot open the Tupperware. Let's have a look on the results. Again, you find the dogs in blue and the pigs in pink. First of all, the orientation alternation. So the frequency of the number of the alternations of orientations that the animals were doing. You have the baseline phase and unsolvable phase. So this is what we compared. And what we found is that both pigs and dogs display this behavior similarly in the baseline phase. But relative to the baseline phase, during the unsolvable, only dogs increase the alternation of orientation. We have to take in account that the unsolvable phase is the real, let's say, test condition. So it's the condition in which we expect that the animal initiates these interactions with the humans. So in this sense, the expected human-oriented communicative behaviors were only found in dogs and not in pigs. We also checked the apparatus interaction. So the time that the animal was engaged in physical interaction with the apparatus. What we found is, of course, like both pigs and dogs increase their apparatus interaction during the unsolvable phase, but pigs did increase it much more than dogs. And they also tended to interact with the apparatus more than dogs. So pigs not only perform less human-oriented communicative behaviors in the unsolvable task, but they only prove to be more persistent in trying to solve the task on their own. So they were more like physically interacting with the apparatus. And the last of our like communicative studies is the showing behavior. In this, the animals were a bit older. We tested them like a bit later in time. We tested like 9 dogs, 9 months dogs, and 11 of our mini pigs of around 10 months, more or less. So this is the setting, how it looks like. There were like 2 possible hiding places, so 2 possible hiding boxes. This is these black boxes that you are seeing in the picture. The food was visible for the animal, but inaccessible. And here, before going ahead, I just want to like tell like something, because those of you that are like familiar with the showing behavior paradigm might know that normally in the showing behavior studies, the food is placed in an elevated surface and not in a box. So it's placed in a surface like high up, so the animal cannot manipulate it at all, nor the food. So neither the food nor the box that contains the food But in our case, as we were testing pigs, we needed to make it like pig proof. So pigs have like a bit of anatomic differences from dogs, and they are not very good with like moving their neck to like different places, and they cannot really like look up. So this is like the so like this is in the picture, you see how much they can like look up. So like placing the food in a really high elevated surface was not like working for pigs, and they were just not like caring about like the presence of the food. This is why we put like the food on a ground level. We had like 3 conditions at the classic Microchip 2000 showing behavior paradigm. We had like 1 condition in which the animal was alone with the owner without food. This served to test for any human-oriented behaviors in the absence of food. Another condition in which the animal was alone with the food without the owner, test for like food-oriented behaviors. And then we have what is the real test condition, food and owner condition, in which both the owner and the unreachable food or out of reach food were present. In this condition is in which we expect, or in which we wanted to assess, the emergence of referential communicative behaviors. So let's have a look again into our results. I put here, you have here like all the conditions. In the x-axis, you have like the 3 conditions. If you remember, I said that in the food condition, the animal was alone with the owner. So in this condition, for like assessing the orientation alternation, what we measured was like the orientations between the boxes and the door through which the owner had left. So this is why we have like all the conditions here. What we found is that in the case of dogs, the presence of both the owner and the food trigger and increase this orientation alternation. So in the test condition, food and owner condition, dogs perform more orientations of alternations with the owner and the target. And also what we found is that in the presence of food, dogs alternated the orientation more than pigs. So when the food was present, dogs did it more than pigs. And lastly, in the presence of the owner, pigs increase the display of this behavior. So only like the owner there was what triggered this behavior in pigs. Of course, as there was no difference between like the owner condition and the food and owner condition, we cannot say that this behavior served as any kind of referential communicative function in pigs. So what we found is that these human-oriented referential communicative behaviors was only found in the dogs and not in pigs. For the orientation towards the boxes, we also measure the time that they were oriented towards the boxes. What we found is that dogs, again, increased the orientation towards the boxes when both the owner and the food were present. So again, in the test condition, the dogs orient towards the box much more than the other conditions. In the case of pigs, we found like the contrary pattern. They oriented less towards the box when there was no food. But there were no differences between the food condition and the food and owner condition. So pigs oriented towards the box, and they didn't care if the owner was present or not. And lastly, in the presence of food, pigs oriented towards the boxes more than dogs. So what we found is that this like a referential communicative function of these behaviors, like being oriented towards the box, was only present in dogs. And pigs proved to be just much more food oriented. So this orientation towards the box, in the case of dogs, served as this directional component of the showing behavior. So first they attracted the attention of the owner, and then this orientation towards the box served as this behavior. So what have we learned, or what is our like take-home message or discussion? Well, first of all, during these years, I think that we proved that family pigs are a good candidate for comparative human-animal interaction studies. So as our pigs were really like human socialized, they were exposed to different like stimuli, testing them in like different contexts was pretty easy, let's say, because they didn't show any fear reaction, any stress reaction. So we could like test their spontaneous performance without the need of any habituation phase or training phase. And I think that's important because sometimes under like farm conditions, even though animals are also like habituated to humans, they need a bit more of like training to perform the studies. We also found that like pigs and dogs display some human-oriented behavior in some contexts. So this points to the pigs have also like the predisposition to initiate some kind of interactions with humans, because like, for example, in the unsolvable task, in the control condition, they could just explore the room and they were like, yes, like displaying some human-oriented behaviors. However, young dogs show the greater propensity for communicating with humans. They also perform key communicative behaviors, for example, this face orientation in natural conditions or in control conditions. And they did it to a greater extent than pigs. Also, the emergence of referential communication was only found and only proved in family dogs. And we couldn't find it in family pigs. However, we found that pigs were orienting towards the human in some contexts. So this behavior might function or might have a communicative function in pigs. At least they are attentive towards the human. If this is because of their learning experience with humans, of course it could be, because these pigs were already, as they were also human socialized, they knew that the food was coming from the humans, the social reinforcements, but was coming from the humans. So maybe in the absence of any clear goal in this control condition, they were like oriented towards the human because they were like expecting things like coming from the human. But as you might remember in our first study, in the face orientation, they were pretty small. They were like 4 months old, and they were already showing this orientation towards the human. Besides this, of course, we found that pigs showed greater food orientation, and they are better in physical problem-solving abilities. Let's say they have like better manipulative skills. This can be explained with their like natural foraging behaviors, because pigs in their nature, they spend like at least 1/3 of their like routine, of their like daily routine, trying to find food. And how they do it is like they root the ground. So they have like a very strong and easy to manipulate like snout, and they are very good in like taking food from the ground. This is like just a mini pig doing like this natural routine behavior. So of course, with this note, they are better in like trying to solving physical problems. So as a bit of like a summary, let's say that like species-specific predispositions, at least in this context, in these studies, seem more important than domestication or intense human experience for the emergence of certain human-oriented communicative behaviors, more like these complex human-oriented communicative behaviors as like referential communication. Of course, in these species-specific predispositions, we have to think that they are also linked to the different domestication histories. So it's not only about like domestication in general, but of course, like the different domestication histories could like have like influence in how they communicate with humans. But also we speculate that as there are also like wild animals that have been proved to show these referential communicative behaviors more than the pigs. We suggest that there might be like more general species-specific predispositions that are shared among those species that perform this human-oriented communicative behavior. So in line with like new researches and with other groups, we think that maybe there are these other species-specific predispositions that can be based in how animals already communicate in an intraspecific level. Dogs are very good in using like social signs and for producing and also like for perceiving social signs for within the species communication and cooperation. And pigs are not that good in like visual domain. So we speculate that this could be one of the differences. And before ending, I just want to take the time to tell you that we are still looking for mini pigs because we are, of course, still with this research. We are doing now a citizen science test, and we are like looking for mini pigs owners all around the world. So because we are aiming to continue studying these amazing animals and communicative and social interactions with humans. So if you know some piggy owners, or if you have access to some piggy owners, just like you can like send us an email. And with this, I'm like ending the presentation. So thanks very much. And I'm ready for any discussion or questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Paula, for this very entertaining presentation. We already have a bunch of questions in the chat, so I'm starting right away.
Okay.
Shelley is asking, she's interested to know about the types of vocalizations pigs were making during this work. Do you recall, even anecdotally, what types of sounds they have made?
Yes, of course. I mean, we in all the tests that I'm like showing, because of course we don't have enough time to show all the results, but we measure all the vocalization in every test. We didn't find any communicative function of those vocalizations. So let's say we didn't find any increase of vocalization during the test conditions. But pigs proved to be, in general, regardless like the conditions, they proved to be much more vocal than dogs. And mostly the vocalization, we were not really like characterizing the behavior, so we didn't make like a difference. We were not like looking for difference in behavior in vocalization, just for vocalizations in general. But mostly what they were doing were like grunting. It was like the most normal and founded like vocalization. We didn't find any other, like they were not like making these squeals or squeaks or any high pitched vocalization. It was more like normal gruntings.
Thanks so much. There's another question from Lucy. She thinks it's a really interesting comparison. Nice to see pigs behaving without having to overcome their fear of humans. She's not familiar with pet pigs and is wondering whether they are fed similarly to dogs, like with discrete meals and pocket snacks and stuff like that.
It's if they are fed, sorry, like the food.
Yeah, yes, whether they are fed similarly.
Okay, yeah. Well, no, there are indeed like companion pigs shouldn't be like fed as dogs, because I mean they really love food and they can like put a lot of weight if you like don't give them like correct balanced meals. Normally there you can, what we do, it's like our owners give them like a bit of like special like pet mini pig, but like pet pig like food, but mostly they are fed by like a mix of vegetables, mostly like vegetables, of course a bit of protein, because like we all might remember that pigs are omnivorous and they need to eat like animal protein, at least to a bit of extent. And so what we normally give them is like a bit of eggs or even like worms, and then as a treat, fruits, but also they need to be like very like given by like a lot of care, because as we have seen in the studies and in general, pigs are really food oriented, so they eat everything that they find. So you really take care. You really have to take care.
Thanks so much. There are a number of questions popping in here. So Luis is asking, or he's stating that he thinks that's incredibly interesting research, and has a question: how comparable is the age of the dog and pig subjects in terms of developmental stage of social skills?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a very, very nice question, and I think like very important, because for us was also like when we started, we were like really like trying to think how was like the best way. So how were like the more or less matching ages. First of all, it's very important to know that the socialization period of the pigs ends quite earlier if we compare it with dogs. So for example, like pigs, like until like 10 weeks, more or less, is their socialization period. And we know that dogs is like a bit more. So this is why, first of all, we tried that our pigs were at around like 7 months at home to more or less have this socialization period, similar as dogs. And then pigs develop sexual maturity a bit earlier than dogs. So around 6 months, they can be already like sexual mature. But on the other hand, they still grow until 2 years. So for us at the end, as also some kind of breeds, we also try to find more or less like the good like matching breeds can also mature around 6 months. We decided to just make parallel like the ages of the animals, but was like a real like brainstorming when we started with the tests.
Thanks so much. Maria has another question and thinks this is an interesting study on human-animal interactions and is excited for its application on animal-assisted interventions. So she's stating that they have dogs and cats as therapy animals, and she's interesting to explore having therapy pigs as well. Do we have some remarks on that?
Okay. So I already have like different, I mean, like different people contacted me about this fact because it's really interesting. So our pigs were not like really like working for therapy pigs, but as they were like, they are like very like human socialized, we were taking them to different like events, for example, like kids and like with like when there were like scientific days, and they were quite like calm and quite like behaving naturally. I think that these mini pigs can be like good for, from my experience. This is mostly like what I've seen for therapy pigs, but for that you really need to be conscious and also consistent in their training. Because if you really like human socialize them, they can be like very gentle and very nice. But also, as they are again very impulsive and very like food oriented, if they start to behave a bit aggressive for like finding the food, for example, for like when they go after the treats, if we don't know how to deal with this, they can they can get or they can display more like aggressive behavior. So I don't have like real experience and I don't know about like really like therapy pigs, but I think that under supervision and under like having like a plan for how to train these pigs, they can really good.
Thanks for your thoughts on this, Paula. There's a question from Zahid. He's wondering whether pigs, I think there's a missing word, but I think he refers to pigs, whether they communicate via sound, in which frequency range they hear and communicate, and whether males produce more sounds to communicate. He's following this up in another question to specify this, whether males of different sizes or age produce different oriented frequencies. So I think he's referring on the vocalizations. You've referred in the sound, and whether you saw any sex differences or differences.
We haven't found like, I mean, like first of all, I don't really know the answer because like we are not like really like assessing in concrete like the vocal behaviors, and so in our experience we didn't find any sex difference like at all. So indeed we have like, of course we have to think that we have like 12, 13 pigs in the project. So what we have more, this is not in the study, but what we have more is like individual differences. So those pigs that are vocal, for example, what we found is that those pigs that are vocal or more vocal are always more vocal, consistently more vocal across contexts. But we didn't find any relation with sex, at least in our research. But if there is like a difference or if there is like an answer for this question, I don't know. So what we found is more this, that I think is also very interesting, like that there is like an individual consistent in this vocalizations, in this vocal behavior. So pigs that were more talkative, they seem to be more talkative, like in every context.
Thank you, Paula. There's another question from Lucia. She says she understands more or less how the pigs were selected for the study, but was wondering how the dogs were selected.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Of course, like dogs were not like, they are not part of this like intensive project as pigs are, but we are like, so in our department, in the Department of Pathology in Budapest, so this is the Family Dog Project department. What we do is like, we have like a big database of dog owners, and they come normally like very like happily to perform tests with their dogs. So for our case, as we were like looking for very young pups in some of the studies, and also we wanted to know that really they were at home from 8 months or like 8 weeks, similarly as pigs, we were like really like trying to find this dog. So we posted some advertisements, but with this criteria, and we ensured that these dogs were fulfilling them in order to compare them with the pigs. But they were just family dogs from normal human families.
Thanks, Paula. There's another question from Sabine. She was wondering, or she's wondering, if the visual communication you studied between animal and human was similar to the communication these animals use between individuals of the same species, like facial orientation, visual contact, and things like that.
Yeah, that's a very good question as well, and something that we are like interested mostly because, like, for example, for what we know is like for dogs, it's much more like easier already in an intraspecific level to perform this kind of behaviors, like because their neck is more flexible, their visual properties are like better, so they already display this. Pigs, although they also perform visual communication, it's true that they are not so good as dogs. And for example, what now we are seeing in also like all these studies served us to know more about pigs in general. And now after these years, what I'm like sure is like, for example, these gaze alternations that, for example, like in the goats or like horses, seem much like it's like a behavior that they can perform. I think that for pigs, it's really challenging to perform it as like in a normal condition because of their anatomical constraints. So this question, I think it's very important because it addresses really like this species-specific characteristics. So in order to learn more about pigs, for example, like further research should be for example, like trying just to like make some out-of-reach reward that the pigs cannot really at all manipulate, and see if they like how if the communicative behaviors in this case are more indicative of communicative functions. And what like this question is exactly that for dogs, I think it's like we think that it's more natural already in a specific level, species level, and for pigs maybe these behaviors are already like challenging to perform. Yes.
Thank you so much. There are still questions popping in. There's another one from Maria, a very specific one, I guess. She observed that the pig in the first video had a tendency to turn around.
Oh, okay.
So she was wondering what this behavior could indicate.
Wow, I'm really happy that people were so attentive and the videos were so nice displayed. So yes, this pig, his name is Lajos, and he's one of like super pigs, and he was just performing this behavior because the owner just was teaching him that behavior in that moment. So of course, as I was not reinforcing it with food in the video, he was trying to display everything that he knew in that moment. So not only looking at me, but also like this turning behavior that he was like learning. It was just like an ability, like a skill that he learned.
Thank you. There's another question from Liza. She thinks this is really interesting research topic and wishes you good luck with for your PhD. She works with pigs and spends a lot of time getting them socialized from a young age, and is asking whether you did any assessment with more than one pig or more than one dog at one time, or was it always done individually? Just wondering how the increase in stimulus of other animals might have influenced their behavior.
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm going to read it because I'm not sure that I understood. So I mean, what what we done is just yes. So all everything was assessed, yes, individually. I guess it's like the answer of the question. I didn't understand it very well. So I don't know if it's because we are not working really with foreign pigs. So yes, basically, so how we socialize them, and it's also the question about is, besides having them really exposed to the humans at their home, these pigs, every pig, so individually, they were coming to the university once per week, more or less. So they were really human socialized, not only with their owners, but also with us. I don't know if I answered the question. Well, let me see.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. Liza, if you want to have some specification on this, feel free to drop a follow-up question in the chat.
Okay, sorry. Now I'm saying if we, sorry, just before that, if we socialize them with more than one individual at the time. For pigs, when they were like really small, they were, yes, like socialized more or less like together. But then once they were like placed in their homes, most of our pigs are like one single pig per family. Some of them, what is very interesting from our pigs is like most of them are living with dogs as well. So they are really like dog socialized, even though we know that it's not very nice to put them together. Not, I mean, all of them have like a lot of supervision, but yes, like our pigs were like living, they are like one single kid pig per family. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem at all. Yeah, I think this was the main intention of the question. Yeah. There's no further question. I have a last one. I really appreciate the setup, comparing pigs kept in a household as companions with dogs. So having or trying to have a similar background. And I was wondering, you mentioned that you try to standardize these backgrounds to a certain degree, whether this also included something like instructions to the owners or something like that, because I can easily imagine dogs, or if dogs have a predisposition to interact with humans, that you easily get positive feedback loops, and then dogs just excel because they have a lot more positive treatments from the human because they requested basically, and they interact more with the humans. So do you have them some guidelines for the owners as well, some recommendations how they have to treat or interact with the animals?
Exactly. So, and that's like super important because as you say, like for dogs, it's like something that they perform this behavior naturally, so they get really reinforced from the humans, no? First of all, knowing pigs, so I mean, like pigs are also like very social when they are like small, so they follow the humans like very nicely, and in some extent like similarly to dogs. But yes, to our owners, we did like a complete like guidelines. So they were like they had like a follow-up like guidelines for every week. So at the beginning of the months when they were like really like young pigs, they had like things to do like, let's say, like every month. And also we trained them. So we did like some like we teach them some skills as dogs. So they were also like this. We also wanted to have this like bonding between the owners and the pigs, similarly as dogs. So of course, like if you train your pigs to come to you, you train to pigs to like lay down and to sit and everything like that, like for the owners, it's like much more like reinforcing as well. And exactly it's for that, to try to balance for this like naturally human-oriented behaviors that dogs perform. So yes, we were like telling the owners exactly more or less what to do. And with this training and this time together, they were, yes, like more or less performing similarly as to family dogs.
Thanks so much for asking all these questions. I do not see more questions in the chat right now. So I just will say again that thanks so much for joining our webinar. Thanks so much for showcasing and showing your research to the audience, and for dealing with a lot of interesting questions at the end of the discussion. So thanks a lot for joining us. Just before we leave, I just wanted to announce to join in on our last Applying Ethology webinar on, I think it is June 13th. After that, we will have a summer break and we'll continue with our webinars in September. So join us on June 13th for Saeed Shafi Sabet. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's going to talk about his research on responsiveness to acoustic stimulus in cherry chimps. So join us for our last webinar in 2 weeks. And thanks again, Paula, for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Christian, and everyone. Thanks very much for being here that late. So bye-bye.
Bye-bye.